Hello everyone, welcome back. Justin here again. Another video, another watch. This one, another mechanical hand-winded watch. This one actually very special to me. This is the first watch that I worked on to get me on this horology journey. So this one, as the title says, this one is a cheap watch. This one around $75 US for the whole thing. That is the movement, the case, the wristband, everything. So price-wise, this one is a very good looking watch for the price that you pay. And what we'll see later is these things run accurate, surprisingly well. But as we saw, this watch is an unbranded watch. The dial, the case, the crown, and the wristband is a bit of a big pilot copy. So it's quite large in size. And the movement itself, this one is a Chinese movement. This one is from a company called Seagull. This particular movement called the Seagull ST36. So what I'll do is I'll leave a link to this. You can buy this full watch online for around $75, just to prove that I'm not lying and it is genuinely that price. So if anyone's interested to get one of these things to work on, look in the description below, and I've left a link for anyone that might want to get one to maybe start the journey as well. But this particular movement, it is the Seagull ST36. So it's a mechanical hand-winded movement with 17 jewels, which is actually a clone. So anyone that's got interest in watches, they will know that this looks very familiar. The movement is actually it's an ETA 6497 clone. So that clone was the ETA clone was actually originally a pocket watch movement, hence the size. So this one quite large. But the movement itself, the ETA version, has also been used in many well-known watch brands. But most famously, the ETA 6497 was popularized and rose to fame by the success of Panerai. The success of Panerai led watch collectors not only to learn a bit more about Panerai, but it also put the ETA 6497 movement on the map. So this movement quite famous actually. As we can see, and as I've mentioned, one pro of this type of movement being designed to be used in pocket watches is the movement is large. The movement is very big. So everything is such a dream to work on. Everything is easily accessible, very easy to locate, very easy to dismantle and reassemble, which is why I believe this was chosen. When I did my watch repair course, it was like a 4-hour course. This was the watch that they gave us to work on. And they chose this particular movement for that very reason, because it's just so simple, it's just so nice to work on. So anyone looking to get onto the horology journey, I would recommend definitely looking up one of these Seagull movements, because the horology journey is only enjoyable if you're learning and if you're progressing, and this is definitely one of their movements that's quite forgiving. So before we go on and I start talking about the watch and talking about the dismantle and the reassemble, I'd just like to say a big thanks to everyone that's following the page and everyone that's sort of liking and commenting on these videos, because it really does help the channel. So anyone that's returning to view this one, really appreciate the support, and anyone that's new, I hope you like what I'm posting. I'm taking into consideration, I read the comments and I do take into account what you guys are saying, because ultimately I see these videos and I do the edits and I watch these things hours on hours on hours, and I watch the same thing over and over again just for the editing really. So some things that you see and point out are not necessarily things that I can see and point out. So just getting the feedback in the comments below really does help me out. I take them on board. And on this one, someone said in the previous videos that I sound a bit rushed. And I wholeheartedly agree. Watching back on them, I'm definitely sounding a bit rushed for time. And that's mainly because this type of thing is very new to me. The voiceover work, the filming, everything that goes along with putting a YouTube video together. It's very new. I'm learning the ropes. I'm learning what works, learning what doesn't work. And the voiceover part is head and shoulders by far the hardest part. Some people are naturally gifted at being public speakers, and some people really have to work hard at it. So for this video, I'm just going to be less technical, a bit more of an open discussion, and I'm just going to try and slow everything down so it's a bit easier to follow and less rushed. Another thing I really need to think about and be conscious of is the camera angles. So someone also mentioned that some of the movements, especially the smaller ones, the alpha one I did on the last video, especially if you're watching it on, say, like a phone or a small tablet, then I appreciate some of these things may be a bit too small to see. I'll try and keep the movement itself and the camera angles just to be able to show up close. Just zoom everything in a little bit more, just so it's not so much of a squinting session and a bit more enjoyable to watch, a bit easier on the eyes. But moving on, let's get back to the watch. Let's start talking about this watch. You can see the dismantle going well. This one's so easy to take apart. A nice thing about this one is all of the screws on the main plate for the bridges, the barrel bridge, the train wheel bridge, even the balance wheel bridge, everything, all the screws are the same. So there's a high level of standardization on this watch, which again just makes it so easy to arrange all the screws and not have to worry about putting everything into individual compartments to make sure you don't incorrectly put any given screw in the wrong place. The dismantle so far, everything going well. Right here we're taking off the train wheel bridge, so it's held down with 3 screws, and you can see the three purple jewels there for the train wheels to hold them in position. But we'll lift this one up and we'll get to see the orientation and the layout of the train wheels. And there we have it. So when I do dismantle stuff, what I do is, instead of just going all guns blazing and thinking, oh, let's just take everything off now and we'll worry about reassembling it later on, you do have to take a little mental note to understand exactly where everything's come from, just so you know where everything needs to go back. When you first get into the watchmaking hobby, you'll find that the disassembly is actually the easiest part. It's very straightforward as long as you follow some form of logic and remove the components in a logical order. There's not really a black and white order in which things should be removed, but there is definitely an order that makes more sense than another order. So every movement is different. Every movement, you just have to eyeball it up. The more you work on, the more you understand, and the more you know what's going to work, what's not going to work. But everything I'm taking apart, I'm just giving it a visual inspection, making a mental note of where everything comes from, just so I know that when it comes back to reassembly, everything is going to go back exactly where it come from. Disassembly almost complete. We are on to the keyless works here, which I've mentioned before, but the keyless works actually my favorite part of the watch, both disassembly and reassembly, just because it's very simple, just because it's very robust and you don't have to worry about anything being damaged. But one thing to pay attention for the keyless works is, so we have the yoke and the spring. The spring sits underneath the set and lever spring, so that plate, and that yoke spring is held under a lot of tension, and we just don't want that thing flying off, because I mean, it's not impossible to find it if it flies off, but they're so light they can stick to anything. They stick in your beard, they'll stick on your jumper, it's just very difficult to find it, so best to avoid it. Just take extra care. But we've got the setting lever and the setting lever screw coming out, and that's it. Disassembly complete. Nice and simple. So got this tray. I'll just put everything in the tray to keep it nice and organized and away from any more dust. And I'm going to give this thing a little inspection just before we clean it. But based on the last video, before cleaning, I'm just going to use some pegwood just to clean some of these jewel holes. So remember, in the last video, it was actually one of the jewels may have been a bit gunked up, which prevented the amplitude of the watch and kept the amplitude quite low. So lesson learned, cleaning them jewel holes before cleaning, quite important. Otherwise, you'll put everything back together and you just might not get things behave as you want them, as you would expect them to behave. In a previous video, another person asked, did I clean the barrel and the mainspring? Absolutely. I didn't include it in some other videos, but this one I'll keep it in. We removed the main barrel and the top plate. We would get the barrel arbor out with some tweezers. Then, in order to remove the main spring, there's no fancy way of doing this. You just have to manually do it. But I do see other people doing this, and they always do it with some of the watch parts laid out on their mat. Which, I mean, you can do it, but if that spring jumps out or that spring knocks one of them screws off your table, good luck. Good luck finding them. So I like to put everything in that dust cover out of the way and somewhere safe before I remove that spring. Moving on to the cleaning. So I've got a 3-stage clean in the ultrasonic cleaner. First one is an initial degrease. Then I have the first rinse and the second rinse. Everything on for a 10-minute cycle. Everything preheated to 40 degrees. But once clean, we can see this watch in all its glory. Check this out. Love these shots, by the way. Just goes, like, you don't realize how complicated a watch is until you lay it out like this. So it's always a pleasure to see. Finger cots going on, very important for when you do assembly. This assembly, I don't typically use the finger cots because I know this thing's going to go through a 3-stage clean. But for reassembly, once everything has been cleaned, you want to avoid touching anything with your fingers. Putting the mainspring back into the main barrel. You saw there I had to do this one again with my fingers. I did buy a mainspring winder. However, I am yet to find, it comes with around 16 different sizes for 16 different barrel arbor sizes and spring diameters, but I'm yet to find something I can use it on. I don't know what I've bought, but it's absolutely shit, to be honest. Shocking. Maybe one day I'll find something I can use it on, but up until now I've had to do everything by hand, unfortunately. Frustratingly as well, because the one I bought, the mainspring winder, it wasn't cheap. So don't be fooled. I think if you're going to buy mainspring winders, you can't scrimp. You just have to spend the money and get the big brand ones, I guess. Unless anyone knows of a decent one that you can buy, a good all-rounder. Please let me know, and I'll look into it. But now, everything getting ready for reassembly, and you can see I've got this big, chunky, it's disgusting movement holder. Very cheap looking, very nasty and clunky. But this movement is so big, it doesn't fit in my version 1. I got the small size version movement holder, and this size movement just doesn't fit in it. So I've had to use this big beast, which makes things very difficult because you can see the plastic pegs that hold the movement in position. They go above the height of the movement. When you're installing things like bridges, which is why I had to rotate the movement round a bit in the holder itself, when you're installing things like bridges, them pegs get in the way. Look at this. I'm going to have to move it around again because them little plastic pegs, they're just a nuisance. So I think a new movement holder is going to be on order. The version ones are very nice, and I think I'm going to have to get one, just a bigger version. It will make life a lot easier. but onto the nervous part where we've got the train bridge going on, and we need to try and align all the pivots for the trainer wheels to make sure that everything's lined up, so when we screw that down, everything is where it should be and we don't damage anything. So all I'm doing is I'm going to look with my loop, apply a bit of pressure, and give the main barrel a spin, just to make sure that everything is engaging, everything's connected, and nothing's dislodged. And then we can loosely clamp this down, give it another check before we ultimately clamp them down all the way. So I move the main barrel and I can see that everything spins. So check twice, clamp once. So you can see here, even on this macro lens, you can kind of see where the pivots are through the jewels. Another good thing about a big movement, you don't really have to use a loop, your eyes can see it, especially on this macro lens. So it's quite nice for you guys to see. But going in next we have the escape wheel. This one of the smallest, more delicate wheels within a watch. So again, I'm going to put this in position. What is nice about this movement is it has its own individual bridge for the escape wheel. So some movements quite challenging, quite difficult, where everything lines up under one bridge, which makes it quite difficult to align everything at once. Because if you have 3, 4, 5 pivots to align, all it takes is one to be out of a line. That bridge will not go down all the way. You will not be able to screw that down, and you will damage it. So having the final wheel, the escape wheel, bridge on its own, one, it de-risks damaging the escape wheel, and two, it just makes the installation a lot easier, a lot simpler. ETA, guys, hats off to you, smart engineers. And Seagull, hats off to you for copying the ETA guys. So I'll give it one last check, and I can see now everything goes through and the escape wheel is now rotating. So that final bridge, I can clamp that down and be quite firm that everything is where it should be. Installation going quite well so far. Next thing to do is to apply some lubricant to some of these posts and some of these rotating parts, just to ensure that anything that doesn't have a jewel and is rotating maybe metal within metal, just need to make sure that it's not running dry and that there is some lubrication. The better the watch is lubricated, the smoother it will run, which you would see on a time grapher. So we've got ratchet wheel, crown wheel going in. This one with the key for this one is a square hole. So just need to make sure that one, it aligns with the square peg on the arbor below, just so that when we turn the ratchet wheel, it is connected to the main spring. And two, to make sure the ratchet wheel and the crown wheel, the teeth are engaged. Final thing to go in will be the click spring and the click. The main aim for this click spring, a very simple design. So you see it's just a very fine spring, and the click itself is just a piece of metal with that lever coming out, which engages with the ratchet wheel. So what we'll see when I test the click later on, once it's screwed down, this just prevents, when you wind the watch up, being a mechanically winded watch, when you wind a watch up, what you want for the power to be stored within the watch and it not just to release the energy instantly. So that click just prevents the power, once you wind it in, it prevents the power from unwinding itself. So if I turn the wheel now, you see the spring is clicking over, and then what it does is it backs off and prevents the ratchet wheel from unwinding all the way. Flip the movement over, and again, it's going to be another case of lubrication. So a lot of these posts, you see there's no jewels, so the minute wheel, intermediate wheels, the setting bar, everything, even the cannon pinion going on now, everything is just metal on metal, so we just need to lubricate. One thing I thought that you didn't have to do initially was, I always wondered why the cannon pinion, that one that went on in the center, I didn't think that you need to lubricate that post, but turns out you do. And what happens if you don't? When the watch is fully assembled and you pop the crown out to set the time, what will happen is the crown will just feel very stiff, and setting the time will just feel it'll be very difficult to set the time. So when you turn the crown, it goes through a few different wheels, one of them being the minute wheel, which is a very thin piece of metal. So if you're overstressing some of these cogs, then chances are you could damage it. So lesson learned, the cannon pinion must be lubricated underneath. If not, you just risk damage. But we'll see here, as I mentioned earlier, the keyless work's my favourite part, just because 1, it's very simple, 2, it's very robust, and 3, I've never had a problem. You normally like things that you don't have problems with. If something keeps giving you a headache, humans tend to have an instinct to try and avoid it, but keyless works is very straightforward, very basic. So we see here we've got the cannon pinions being on, the minute wheel, got some intermediate wheels connected to the sliding pinion and the winding pinion. The winding stem also in, and the setting lever has been released to allow the winding stem to go all the way in and lock it in position. And then we have this yoke here. So this yoke sits in the sliding pinion in a small recess, and then we've got this tiny spring, the one I said, the yoke spring, that will then put some tension on the yoke. So when you push the crown in, it pushes the winding pinion in. When you pull the crown out, the spring then pushes the yoke out. So I like to put this one in last, just to make sure that there's less risk of it flying off. So once the spring is in position, I can put this setting lever spring directly over the top, which is held in position with one single screw. Typically the smallest screw on a movement also, so be wary. Once in position, just got some more lubrication to do. And we can give this keyless works a check, make sure everything is engaging, everything behaves as you would expect it to behave. So what you would feel, as I mentioned with the cannon pinion, if the cannon pinion wasn't lubricated, when you pull the crown out to try and adjust and set the time, then you would know that it was feeling a bit stiff. So that's the point where you would need to stand back and think what's wrong and not continue with the assembly. So if something doesn't feel right, it's because it isn't right. So you can't just close one eye and continue and just plow on, because when you get to the end, you just risk damaging something or something not running as well as it should run. Lesson learned for me, if something doesn't feel right, it's not right. You have to then look into what the problem could be, and you do have to resolve these issues. Pallet fork and pallet bridge going on, but I've put in one screw for now. Before I screw this all the way down, I'm just going to check everything is aligned, everything is engaging. I'll wind a bit of power into the mainspring, and I'm just going to see if the pallet fork flips. We can see here that the pallet fork is flipping over quite nicely. So that indicates that first and foremost, power is getting all the way through from the mainspring to the pallet fork. Secondly, I'll just use my loop, and I'll just make sure that that pallet fork is engaged and the pivots go through and are aligned with the jewels, the corresponding jewels on the main plate and the pallet bridge. But another little check, still looking good. So now we can put in the second screw and clamp this one all the way down. Send it home. Now, everyone's favourite part of rebuilding a watch, putting on the balance, the moment of truth. Have we destroyed it, or will this thing kick back up? We shall see. So just aligning everything, got the bridge aligned with a few pegs and the screw hole, as well as the balance wheel needs to align with the jewel on the base plate. And we can see it's looking all right, but it's not quite seated properly. So I'll just give it a bit more of a manipulation. Yes, and there we go. That's what we want to see. This thing firing up straight away. It's such a pleasure when you see this happen. It's so nice seeing it just fire back up. I'll wind the watch a little bit more, and you can see the amplitude there looks nice and healthy. That balance wheel is rotating at a nice pace. We'll finalise the assembly now, and we're just going to oil some of these jewels. This is definitely a fine art. The amount of oil you need to put on is such a minute amount, and you saw the first one I did there, even that one there, horrendous, absolute shocking. I need more practice. Thankfully this watch is just one that I play around with every now and then, so not something that belongs to anyone to wear on a daily or anything like that, just something that I like to mess around with and one I like to learn. But we see here the cap jewels. The cap jewels are unidirectional, so we can see that when we put it under the microscope, you've got one flat side, so the flat side must face down. So make sure you put the oil, a small amount of oil, on the flat side. Then once you send it back home, you have to use this little retaining clip and carefully manipulate this back in position. So again, we've got the cap jewel for the other side. So a tiny bit of oil, the jewel setting there, and then plop, straight back in. And then what remains, just put that retaining clip back and seat it back where it should be. And there we have it. Nice. So once everything's been oiled, let's put this thing on a time grapher, and this will be the moment of truth. And look at that. $75. $75. Insane. The amplitude could be a bit higher, agree, but the beat error, the rate error, incredible. Another good reason for using this cheap Seagull movement as a learner movement, because when you're learning, it's nice when things go right. Not only is this type of watch very easy to work on, but it gives you results. And when you put it on the final time grapher to then adjust, you can get some really good results on this one. I've worked on this watch a few times now, and I've been wearing it around, and I thought, okay, maybe you set it up now, it's accurate now, but then within half a day, 2 days, the accuracy then sort of decreases. But no, this thing keeps its time. That's not to say that it's any better or better than the original ETA 6497, because the materials used are definitely substandard. The finish is substandard compared to the ETA. Would this thing stand the test of time? Will it last 25 years? Probably not. But for something that's $75, if you get a few years wear out of this, you'd be happy. Absolutely. But moving on to the final stages of the reassembly, we can put the dial and the hands back on. And as mentioned, this is a bit of a Big Pilot replica. So with a Big Pilot, I've read that the Big Pilot crown it protrudes quite a lot, exactly like this one. And the reason that it protruded, pilots that may use the watch, even with their gloves on, can still set the time. So whether that's true or not, I'm sure someone will let me know. But I thought that was quite an interesting little thing to read. But check this out. Everything back together. The movement going back in the case. $75, guys and girls. I like. Got the movement ring going in, just to hold everything in position. And the winding stem and the crown will push that back home. Once the winding stem and the crown is in, so we push it back, and then we just need to nip down this setting lever screw just to hold that in position so it doesn't fall out again. Then if we pull on it, it should stay in, which it does. Nice. So this watch, the movement is held in with these two little clips to hold it to the main case, which some of the previous watches I've done, the vintage dress watches, they're just held in position. You can feel the movements rattling around. They're not really held in securely. So this one definitely a step up in quality, even though it is still only $75. But having these retaining screws to hold the movement in and secure it to the case is definitely a good touch. So we got a gasket going on at the back here. This watch has a clear glass back, which we will see as I put it on now. Just so we can marvel at this beast of a movement inside. And there we have it. Check that out, guys. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this watch is definitely a special watch for me because it is the first watch I worked on and the catalyst to start me on this journey. And I would absolutely recommend anyone that is looking to get into watch repair, watchmaking, get one of these bad boys. Look at this. I flip it over and it's just such a nice watch to look at. But I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you for sticking around if you've stuck around this far. Thank you for everyone that has followed me on the journey. Thank you for all the newcomers. I try and get a video out once every 2 to 3 weeks. So the next one, I'm going to look at getting a Seiko. Maybe try an automatic movement. Just something new for me to learn. And if you enjoyed it, please give it a like. Please drop a comment. And I shall see you in the next one. So take care, guys. And I'll see you soon.